Hey everyone, I am Brian Rappaport, the founder and CEO of Quan. Quan is the modern approach for modern brands who want to utilize out of home as a viable channel to grow. And I'm really excited to be here today. First off, a sincere thanks to Anna Bagger and the OAAA for having me and for another incredible conference. It's an honor to have this platform. And after a very tough 14 months, it looks like this could very well be one of the last virtual events. So fingers crossed there. There's a lot of great content to consume, so I definitely want to jump right into it and not keep you guys too long. The direct-to-consumer, aka D2C category, has exploded in the past few years. Whereas the strategy back in the early days of D2C brand growth was to simply focus on the direct response tactics, things have changed. D2C brands are now focusing on more of an omni-channel approach, which includes utilizing out-of-home much earlier on while in serious growth mode. The name of the game continues to be acquisition and awareness. And as out-of-home has evolved, be it with measurement, the ability to be extremely targeted and hyper-local, and of course, within the digital space, there is no reason it can't stand shoulder to shoulder with other offline channels. And then you toss in the value that D2C brands have started to see in physical retail, and that's even more of a reason to strongly weigh out-of-home when eyeing what marketing channels to use. So driving traffic into stores, general awareness, grand openings, all of that can be heavily supported by out-of-home. And for Quan, while we do work with brands across all categories, we do specialize in the D2C sector. Our client roster includes brands such as Away, Daily Harvest, Roman, Public.com, and Judy, among others. And before we get to the exciting part of this fireside chat, which is by far and away my guest, let's just do a quick gut check into how D2C brands have looked at out-of-home, at least from our point of view. Oftentimes when we're introduced to a D2C brand, they're looking at outdoor to do one of two things. One, it's either a full-on awareness driver. They want to make a statement, gain exposure in a new market, fully establish themselves as a brand there. Maybe they want to get in front of investors and prepare for a series raise. And this is where we build a campaign with a multi-layered approach between frequency, large format, and impactful plays. You focus in on heavily trafficked areas, pedestrian areas, and you make it feel like everywhere you go, you see that brand. For us, we did it with Dagny Dover when they wanted to launch in Chicago, Away with Serena Williams and her drop, or United Sodas last summer when they made their debut. And for them, in that case, it was an early stage channel. So it could be in a full-on market or in a certain area within a market like Williamsburg or Brooklyn, within the New York market. And you don't necessarily need to spend an insane amount. You just need a partner that really understands market nuances. And then there's the growth lift driver. And that means there are numbers. There's target zips, high areas of penetration, low areas of penetration, acquisition data, where brands under-index, over-index, heavy emphasis on CAC, and budgets are established, and we look at a market through an audience-first lens. If a brand wanted to test out-of-home in LA, we wouldn't say, okay, well, we need 500K. We'd instead ask for as much audience insight as possible. Psychographic traits, sales data that can be shared to understand where that core audience lives, works, and plays. In most situations in the measurement side, we'll run a lift analysis or track drive to site through anonymized opt-in app source location data to determine which mobile devices were exposed to an out-of-home placement, and then we're able to understand what units perform best and we can optimize to improve performance. So before D2C brands even think about out-of-home, they need to be in a position where it makes sense to spend in the channel. They need to launch and grow. And if they want to be successful, I need bright minds to get them there. And I'm fortunate to have one of the brightest minds in the D2C and marketing world with me today. Nik Sharma is a 24-year-old D2C investor, advisor, and operator who is responsible for assisting and leading growth in multiple organizations, including Hintwater and VaynerMedia. Additionally, he's helped grow a number of other well-known brands, including Haas, Caraway, Dude, and a new Quan client that I mentioned, thanks to Nik's intro, Judy. And Nik and his team at Sharma Brands work alongside brands and publishers to execute ROI-positive campaigns through cohesive digital strategies using paid, earned, and owned media properties. He's a tremendous resource and a fantastic follower on Twitter. And right now, we're going to have a conversation not just about how Nik views out-of-home in terms of a brand-building tactic, but really how he launches at D2C brands successfully and where out-of-home fits among the channels he prioritizes. So I've done enough talking. Let's jump right into it. Nik, really a pleasure getting to know you and work with you over these past few months. Some people look at the pandemic as nothing but a lost year, but for me, I got to meet so many incredible individuals, and you're definitely at the top. And I find some synergy in the reasons why you created Sharma Brands and why I created Quan. So I'd love to know a little bit more about Sharma Brands and what you're most proud of coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me, Brian. Excited to be here. Sharma Brands was kind of the genesis of both working on the agency side as well as on the brand side, and understanding where the white spaces were in terms of when you think about early stage company, there's really two different types, right? There's early stage, and then there's ones that have their feet under themselves, and then there's massive type of conglomerate style companies. So the early stage and the ones that are kind of the massive conglomerates, those are, I think, where there was a lot of white space in terms of, as an early stage brand, knowing everything from the technologies you use behind things like subscription and reviews and CMS and analytics and all these things, right? That's a pretty big black box in terms of, if a brand is starting, where do they put their money or allocate their software dollars to make sure that they are making the best moves for the future of that company. And then with the later stage, like larger companies, they almost have been acting a certain way for so long because they could, right? If a company is doing $500 million in retail sales, there's really no need for them to think about making, 10 or 20 or 30 million on direct to consumer. But obviously when the pandemic hit and retail stores closed down, a lot of these brands were then, forced to shift into a digital first or a digitally native model. And so Sharma Brands, started at the beginning of 2019. We did a full year of basically very deep and heavy execution work with brands like Poopery and Orgain Protein, Judy, like you mentioned, the Pill Club, a ton of these direct to consumer brands. And we really got an understanding of, okay, where are the white spaces when it comes to everything from your website, your softwares, your media buying capabilities, your creative capabilities, your supply chain, your operations, fulfillment, a real 360 understanding. And then we almost come in and help solve for all the things that are not up to par of where they should be.
Awesome. That is a lot. And can you share how you got involved in the D2C world? Because you've worked with so many incredible brands, and I'm curious where this all stemmed from.
Yeah. So I never really got a formal education. And so for me, my career has always really been dictated by my own curiosity. So, it started in ad tech where I learned everything around click-through rate and user psychology and what it really takes for somebody to click and go through and spend time on site. And then it shifted to Hintwater where, I learned kind of all the ins and outs of direct to consumer while building it. It was really the analogy of jumping off a cliff and building a plane while you're falling.
Yeah.
And then I took, at Hint, we were very scrappy. We were very focused on the end result. And so all the learnings combined, that kind of gave me the platform to say, okay, well, I have all this knowledge now. How can I help other companies, whether it be companies I invest in as an angel investor or companies that I become an advisor to, or companies that come to us and say, can we hire you on to help us run the launch? So like most recently, it was this beverage barcode where, we basically anything digital, right? Social, email, SMS, the website, the subscription platform, all that's basically handled and set up by our team. And similarly, we will chase clients that we feel have a lot of potential. And we also obviously get a ton of inbound, which is what allows us to then pick and choose which clients we want to get involved with. But yeah, that's kind of a long-winded answer.
No, that's good because you answered my other question, how you got involved, how you choose to get involved with the D2C brand, whether it's on the investing side or helping them build. And speaking about brands specifically, Barcode's an incredible story, but we kind of first came together around Judy, and there's irony, and then there's what Judy is and the fact that it launched before March of 2020. Can you share a bit about how you became involved with Judy and kind of the evolution of the brand, from your eyes?
Yeah, so I got involved with Judy probably in Q4 of 2019. It was another kind of like intro. They basically wanted us to come in. They had the product, they had the brand. They needed a team to come in and help them bring it to life digitally. So from the website, the media buying, the creative assets, the TV commercial, if they wanted to get something done, like we wanted to get out of home done, then that would also go through us and we would figure out, okay, who's the person that can help us get this done in the most effective way. That's also favored to us in terms of, we don't want to go get ripped off by platforms and agencies. We needed to find kind of the Sharma Brands equivalent for out of home, which ended up being yourself. And so, that started and we had the launch in January. And then obviously COVID started and we flew through our inventory. We were basically sold out for 2 months because we had no prediction of COVID and the impact it would have on our business. So we were sold out. And then, as COVID, came and went and other natural disasters came, We just started, our complete playbook and game plan of what we thought the first, year or 2 years of this company was going to be completely changed.
Right.
And so it was a lot of reacting versus proactive planning and executing.
That's amazing. And then, so we talk about channels a lot, and obviously this is a conference based around out of home. Putting aside out of home for a minute, because we'll talk about that. What are your go-to channels? Like, where do you start when a brand asks you to help craft their go-to-market strategy or their marketing mix?
So the first tests happen, I would say, digitally. And the reason for that is because the feedback loops are so tight and so fast, right? You could light up an ad campaign today at, noon, and by 3 p.m., you have a clear read on what is the copy that works well, what is the creative that works well, what are the offers from a merchandising and pricing perspective that work well and get a customer through the end. And so digital, mainly Facebook, Instagram is usually the first place. That helps you get a good understanding of, okay, what works and why does it work, and what is the punchline that these customers need to hear in order to go from not knowing about the brand to then becoming a customer. Once you have that framework, right, you can either go two ways. You can say, we're going to go expand and do more of this digital stuff, which could be more spend on channels like Facebook and Instagram. It could be adding in YouTube. It could be adding in, Pinterest, Quora, Snapchat, TikTok. There's an endless amount of digital channels. Or you can say, all right, well, now how do we take the data, knowing that we know X, Y, and Z is the punchline and X, Y, and Z is what gets somebody over that finish line. How do we take that and put it into things like out of home, right? Knowing that these are the headlines that have the highest click-through rate. Maybe that should be the hero copy in an out of home campaign, or knowing that this is what it took to get somebody over the finish line. How do we turn that into a TV commercial and test it? You can still test that digitally on platforms like connected TV and over-the-top TV before going to, more traditional cable. But I would say we typically start with digital, and then we figure out the baseline metrics of what we need to know to then branch out into other channels from there.
And where do you see out of home playing a role? Knowing that it's not necessarily, it doesn't only have to be an awareness driver. It could be measurable now. And where would you see, I guess, a time in a brand's growth where you'd consider the channel, and what could be the potential impact it could have, on a D2C brand's growth?
Yeah, I think there's so many different ways to play it. The first few that are coming to mind, obviously brand launch or a new product launch within an existing brand. I think out of home, not only does a great job of awareness, but it also visually can represent what you're selling, right? So unlike a podcast ad or a radio ad where you're just hearing it, with out of home, you're also able to see it and also get the punchline. It's a very quick way to understand what is being sold when done right. Outside of that, I think if you have celebrities tied to your brand, that's an easy place to put that on display, right? Digitally, celebrities are converting less and less every quarter or every year. They have less influence when it comes to purchase decisions, even though they have the brand awareness to kind of bring the validation to your brand. Out of home is a great place to leverage influencers and celebrities that people know and love next to, juxtaposed next to these products or brands. The other one I think is obviously like, anything around socially focused campaigns, whether it's to, push some kind of helpful social message or, push kind of a mass campaign. I think out of home can play a critical role in being one of the layers of that campaign. And I think that's actually another thing too, right? Like out of home shouldn't be looked at as a digital channel where you're looking at direct ROI from that one billboard or from that one, posting in North Hollywood, for example. It's got to be integrated as a part of the rest of your channels, right? It's got to be looked at cohesively with your overall, with your digital, with your TV, with your out of home together, versus it's not like Facebook. Facebook almost kind of gave us that false sense of hope with marketing channels where if we run an ad here, we should see direct response or direct ROI from that one campaign isolated. But it's just not how marketing works, right? That's why you have, this concept of a funnel and a user journey And I think out of home is one of the steps that, for example, if you take out of home and run it on its own, it's probably not going to do as well. Where if you look at out of home plus your digital, you'll probably see a blended higher ROAS or a blended higher ROI versus just running both channels individually.
So we talk about ROI and measurement, which I touched on before. How important is measurement and attribution, and where have you seen other channels struggle but also succeed? Because out of home is out, constantly, trying to defend themselves in light of that measurement question.
Yeah. I mean, I think, out of home is it's like two different languages, right? Facebook or digital attribution measurement is done with impressions, with click-through rate, with purchases. You have pixels, or as of today, maybe lack thereof. And then out of home is more around, you're going by estimated number of traffic. You're going by, how many people may click through to a website or land on a web page that's just has a URL displayed there. But at the end of the day, like I think the biggest problem I've seen with out of home media buying is people buy it the wrong way, if that makes sense. They focus on out of home becoming a direct response campaign that's going to drive immediate purchases versus thinking, okay, if somebody is like in the mindset of, let's take Judy, for example. Emergencies happen. There's no doubt wildfires and earthquakes and all these things are going to happen, right? It's more about how do you take out of home to create kind of that net that, okay, you've probably thought about it. Let's bring this thought back to mind and become kind of that like outer shell, while the digital platforms might become those inner shells to then get you to that conversion. Right? Like Facebook would get the credit, but the out of home is probably what started that thought in the first place.
Definitely. It's funny. So I think with out of home, obviously creative always pops up, and like in anything a brand does, creative is so important. Why is that? Why can you share, one or two examples of your favorite campaigns or brands that you've worked with just simply based off of creative? Because we talk about measurement and DR, and that obviously makes a ton of sense. But then at the end of the day, it could just be as simplistic as creative leading to success for a brand.
Yeah. And I mean, I think without a home, that's pretty much what you're playing with, right? Because there's three things when you look at it from a digital perspective. You have the audience you're targeting, you have your creative, and then you have the experience that creative leads to, right? So out of home, audience, you know what audience is there, right? If you're in Times Square or you're on Hollywood Boulevard, like, a little bit about the audience. The experience part, you could almost say doesn't matter. There could be a link or something like, go to dollarshave.com, but it's probably the last thing you're thinking about. With out of home, it's all about creative, right? And so I think creative is the most important thing when it comes to out of home, because when somebody's driving or somebody's walking or interacting with the world, the creative is the only thing that's going to catch their attention. And it's also not like, when you think about being native to I always say you have to be native to the platform you're in. If somebody's walking or driving, they're not going to pull their phone out and go to a URL, right? But in an attention grabbing creative, like a Haha Tequila, they do a great job with their out of home. Or when Dollar Shave took over Times Square, I think they did a great job from a creative standpoint of really standing out, not just being another billboard ad, but it was something funny, it was something witty, it was something catchy that you then remember, you talk about with your friends, you share with other people, you snap a photo and remember it for later. I would say without a home, creative is the number one variable to focus on.
Definitely. And I think that looking in the past, you see how Casper kind of started the whole DTC craze with all their cartoons and everything in the subway, and everyone was like, who is that brand? And
you never see that same creative in digital.
Yeah.
Right? It's very isolated to out of home, because they recognized, okay, this is what it takes to win in out of home versus this is the creative we need, which is completely different to win on digital.
Exactly. So, I have a million questions, but in fairness of time to end, like, where do you see the D2C category going from here? How does it evolve from an advertising and marketing standpoint? How have your do's and don'ts kind of changed in brand growth now from maybe 3 years ago?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is we're going to see a lot more, there's going to be one level deeper of personalization. So it's not going to be some kind of blanket offer. It's not going to be blanket messaging for, if it's barcode, for example, and it's a performance drink, it's not that the only way it gets marketed is for people who are athletes, right? You almost have to figure out like what are the 27 reasons people are going to come to this brand, and figure out how to communicate that in 27 different ways.
That totally makes sense. That's awesome. Nik, best places to follow and connect and learn from you. Share with I know how to get in touch with you, but to everyone that may be new,
Yeah. So the easiest place is Twitter. I'm at Mr. Sharma on Twitter, Mr. Sharma. The second easiest is you can just text me at 917-905-2340. And the last easiest place is just nik.co, my website.
Awesome. Nik, I cannot thank you enough. You're the man. I appreciate the time and everything that you've kind of taught me the past few months, and looking forward to hopefully doing more. But thanks so much for being a guest. This was incredible.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, everyone.